Hey folks, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about We Have Always Lived in the Castles, chapter 9 and 10. We've always lived in the castle, singular, chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 8 ends with a bang. The fire. Mary Cat starts the fire. She really does start the fire that burns down the house, at least the top floor. The bottom floor is left intact. Julian dies during the fire, but it seems to be from causes unrelated or not directly related. In other words, he doesn't suffocate on smoke. He doesn't. He's not burned himself, but seems to have had some stroke or a heart attack or something like that. And Uncle Julian is gone. Charles leaves, unsurprisingly, as well. So, what does that leave us? It leaves us with Mary Cat and Constance and a half burned down house. For the rest of the book, chapters 9 and 10, nothing really happens. Did you notice this? Nothing, like plot wise, there's no big event after the fire. It's just these young women adjusting to their new lives. The orientation of the town toward them sort of shifts, but no big like plot changing action really happens. That's strange. Usually, especially if you're into pop culture, if you watch Star Wars movies or Marvel movies, there really is no fifth act. The fifth act in a Shakespearean play was the one in which generally speaking, making broad strokes here, nothing much happened. Like the plot was pretty much, especially in the comedies, the plot was over in the comedies by the end of Act 4, beginning of Act 5. The tragedies, are active right to the end. But in many Shakespearean plays, there's this sort of just like, hey, let's have fun. In a comedy, like, let's talk and hang out and just enjoy company and stuff like that. Like it's essentially over, and yet the play goes on for another half hour or so, for another 20 minutes. That's what we get here. Like usually, like again, Star Wars, Marvel, when it's over, it's over. There's not a lot of like sitting around and thinking about what you just saw. Like after the climax, you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, and that is it. After the climax to the movie. Well, the climax happens, I think, when the house burns in chapter 8 here. We've got 9 and 10 sitting around doing nothing. So why do we have those chapters? Why did Shirley Jackson write chapters 9 and 10 if the action was over? It's a thought I want you to keep in the back of your head as we proceed. Beginning of chapter 9, Mary Cat continues to be cuckoo. She says she wished the fire would just reverse itself. She wishes the fire would, sort of build the house back up and go out into the village and destroy the villages, the people of the village's home. Like just this weird thinking. She imagines, you remember at the beginning of the story, she imagines everything's a board game. She imagines that the fire hits the return to start, like go directly to jail square. Just this sort of girlish, magical insanity continues with her. So she has not, the fire has not changed Mary Cat at all. And then at the bottom of 525, this is pretty subtle, but it is a big, huge deal when you're trying to understand Mary Cat, when you're trying to understand Constance and their relationship to each other. What's the big, huge deal? Last sentence on page 525 of my edition. This is the last sentence in the 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph in chapter 9. She says this: I decided that from now on I would not be allowed to hand teacups. What's she doing there? Mary Cat is setting a rule for herself. She's saying, she is setting the rules. She is the one that's saying, I'm not allowed to do such and such. The whole time, this whole book, she says, I'm not allowed to handle the food. I'm not allowed to do this. I'm not allowed to do that. And right here is where it becomes apparent, like, oh, she has been setting these rules the whole time for herself. Why is that such a big deal? Well, if you were anything like me when I first started reading, I figured, oh, okay, so like Mary Cat's kind of a child. She sort of thinks like a child. She acts like a child. Constance is the grown up in the room. She's the one setting rules. Hey, like Mary Cat, you don't need to be around food. You don't need to be doing this or that. You'll break stuff. I'm going to take care of it. This is your world. This is my world. And the rules are set by Constance, it seems. No. Mary Cat sets all the rules. She is the one in control this whole time. So in retrospect, we can see that like every rule, and Mary Cat has a weird relationship to rules. She kind of likes rules, kind of a lot for someone who's so like, whose thinking is as disorderly as it is. She seems to love rules so much. Okay, so what's going on here? This is Mary Cat's method of control. This is how Mary Cat controls her sister. Okay, if I announced tonight to my wife, hey, guess what? I am not allowed to take out the trash anymore. Sorry, I'm not allowed to wash the dishes anymore. I'm not allowed to cook for the family anymore. You know, what I'm saying to her is, now it's your job to do all these things. I've decided unilaterally. Okay, that's a power move, right? Like I'm becoming a tyrant in my relationship to her, but it's sort of in a backwards, weird way. So in a backward, weird way, Mary Cat, it should be clear to us now that Mary Cat is the tyrant here. Okay, because of the violence she enacted against her family in killing them all and poisoning them all, you know, it's become clear that her relationship with Connie is one of master and slave. Connie is going to say as we go on, all these things are my fault. I'm so sorry. She apologizes to Mary Cat for things that like she does not need to apologize for, things that are not her fault. And this is a way of Connie protecting herself. She was this close to getting poisoned. If she had eaten sugar, that she didn't eat sugar much. And so when Mary Cat poisons the sugar and kills her family before the book starts, like Mary Cat knew that she wouldn't be killing Constance. But like, what if Constance that night decided she did want sugar? She'd be dead. Okay, so Constance, if you get below the surface here, like, and it's slowly being revealed to us throughout the course of the book, Constance is living in fear of Mary Cat. Now on the surface, I don't think she even acknowledges that fear to herself. Connie doesn't. But it's got to be there. Everything that Constance does is meant to mollify, to placate her sister, to keep her sister happy. We're going to see this more than once in chapters 9 and 10. So what are chapters 9 and 10 doing? They're fully realizing, like fully fleshing out the insanity, the violence, the evil that is inside of Mary Cat and in her relationship with her sister. Okay, so I am, again, bottom of 525. I decided that from now on, I would not be allowed to handle hand teacups. She's putting rules on herself. What's she doing? It looks like she's putting rules on herself. What she's really doing is forcing her sister to do certain things. She's really, this is a method of exerting power over her sister. It, again, looks like she's making rules for herself. What she's really doing is Mary Cat is making rules for Connie to follow. Okay, Mary Cat says, we're on the moon at last. She's been talking about the moon this whole time. What is the moon? It's a place of absolute isolation. Okay, it is away from everyone, not to be bothered by anyone ever again. And Mary Cat is realizing her dream of total isolation. It's Connie, it's me, and no one else. Uncle Julian's out of the way. Charles is way out of the way. We're going to see him one more time. And the townspeople are out, and they literally, Connie and Mary Cat construct a barricade around the house, and they don't let anyone in ever again. That's not the end of their interaction with the village that we'll see, but it's certainly the end of their face-to-face reaction. Helen Clark does not come in for tea anymore in this burnt-out husk of a house. Okay. The word safety comes up a number of times. Mary Cat mentions her safety, and is it safe, and we need to make this house safe. Safe from what? Now, the house really has, it suffered an incursion at the hands of the villagers. The villagers coming in and like throwing everything everywhere and like rioting and causing all this disarray and stuff. That was real. The fire that Mary Cat herself started, like that was real. Like there are real threats, and there have been real threats to the safety of Connie and Mary Cat. But here, when she says safety in chapters 9 and 10, the safe for safety, this word pops up a number of times. And always look, when you're reading, always look for repetitions of certain words, or nearly related words like safety, danger, other two sides of like one idea. Okay, safety from what? Safety from human interaction. Safety from having to talk to other people. Safety from, and why is that dangerous? Well, when Helen Clark did come in, she was encouraging Connie to leave, okay, to get out. And not leave permanently, but just get out of the house every once in a while. And Connie wouldn't, Connie was staying at home all the time. Mary Cat was the only person that left. This is a threat to Mary Cat's preferred way to live, which is herself, Connie together, these two sisters together and isolated from the world. Anything that shakes up that system, which is really a toxic way of living, isolated to that extent, that's not good for Connie or Mary Cat, but it's what Mary Cat wants. She's deeply evil, not to mince words or anything. And so any threat to her power, any threat to Mary Cat's control, she interprets that and gives it to us as unsafe, okay? Any threat to her control is a threat to her safety. That's not really true. She would be better off, Connie would be better off if they did interact with the outside world, at least the decent people in the town. And, not everyone's a total barbarian in the village, as we've seen. Jim and Helen Clark for two examples of this. People who do have some kindness in their heart. But Mary Cat needs to be, again, this just really emphasizes the point that in Mary Cat's mind, she needs to be in control. She can't have anyone telling her what to do. She cannot be corrected or punished in any way. She is the one who has to be in control. And anything that would threaten that is a threat to herself, is a threat to her safety. Okay, she interprets. Okay, that's a diseased way of looking at things. It's a warped way of looking at things, and she's a diseased mind, isn't she? Okay. So these two young women settle into their new lives. They're going to live in this part of the house that's not burnt out, and that part of the house is just gone now. The days are going to go on. They're going to live on some preserves in the basement. Mary Cat says, page 530, although I did not perceive it then, time and the orderly pattern of our old days had ended. Okay, it's not like I'm going to go to the library on Thursdays. I'm going to go get coffee on Wednesdays. That is gone, and there's a new pattern will emerge. Excuse me. Bottom of 530, we are going to lock ourselves in more securely than ever. Secure from what? Secure, again, from any sort of reaction with the outside world. A kind of security that's a kind of isolation that's no security really at all. She's worried, 533. They might be vulnerable from above. Again, that word vulnerable. And, well, if you want to play devil's advocate and argue with my way of reading this, you might say, well, they really were attacked. Maybe Mary Cat's really worried that they might be attacked again. Maybe. But what evidence is there of that? In fact, I said the attitude of the village sort of changes toward these women, and how does it change? The villagers start sending apologies. They start apologizing for breaking their harp, for smashing their dishes, and they don't just say I'm sorry. They bring food and sort of like leave it on the doorstep They know that the villagers know that the girls don't come out anymore. The women don't come out anymore, but they'll leave chicken or whatever, cooked food for them, which is fascinating. This, food is a theme here. Food is the method by which Mary Cat murdered her family, poisoning their food. And the villagers don't poison the food. They seem to be genuinely contrite on some level, and that's unexpected. Like, I didn't reading this, I didn't expect that. I thought the villagers were just these evil people. If you read Shirley Jackson's story called The Lottery, you get a village in which, no spoilers or anything, but you get a village in which evil seems shot through, okay, a murderousness, or at least a complacency in the face of injustice is shot through that town. And I figured that's what we might get here, but there does seem to be some genuine apologizing here. Now, if we want to read this in the best possible light, they feel sorry for the evil that they've done. They feel sorry for the wrong and the harm they've caused. Maybe they're just afraid. Maybe they're afraid of Catherine Constance and Mary Catherine. Maybe they think to themselves, if these two women are like capable of burning down their own house, like if they get out, who's to say what they're going to do to us? Maybe this food will help them. Just like, you don't have to go to the grocery store. Just you stay in there. We stay out here. We good, right? Like they're offering these. Their house becomes like this altar or something, like this pagan thing where like just placate the gods, like keep them happy, and nothing bad will happen. So they take on this. Connie and Mary Cat seem to take on this like witch-like quality in the imagination of the villagers. So are they really being kind? Connie does she really? When Connie is kind to Mary Cat, is that really kindness, or is Connie just protecting herself, placating the beast? Feeding the beast so that Connie's going to feed Mary Cat so that Mary Cat doesn't eat Connie in some way. And in fact, that Connie's first concern when they're going back into the house, of course, after the fire, they run into the woods. And as they're coming back and they see just how damaged and burned out the house is, not entirely, but much of it, the whole second floor, Connie's first thought, her first anxiety is, how am I going to get Mary Cat her dinner tonight? Like, that's what you're worried about? Mary Cat's dinner tonight? Like, your house is in ashes. Her dinner tonight. Why? Because, remember last time Mary Cat didn't get her dinner? Okay? Constance is, she's an abuse victim here, right? Like, this is how victims of abuse act. They're like apprehensive that they might not be able to care for their abuser and placate their abuser and keep the beast satisfied and quiet, right? Otherwise, who knows what Mary Cat might do next. Okay, so Helen Clark does ask, she says, hey, won't you come out, won't you talk to me? And in this episode in chapter 9 of Helen Clark sort of wanting to reconnect with the girls, what does this accomplish? It shows us Mary Cat hasn't changed at all, but Constance has changed. How has she changed? She doesn't even want to talk to Helen Clark anymore. So she is, her isolation is complete. She's, she's on the same side of Mary Cat now. She is willing to cut off the outside world to the extreme extent that Mary Cat wants. Okay, so yeah, so this does indicate a change in Connie. And look, by the way, look at Jim and Helen Clark sort of get into the discussion. Jim says, Helen is pleading, come on, we'll cook for you, we'll take care of you, like we want to help you. And it seems like her concern does seem genuine. Helen Clark, they don't owe anything to the Blackwood sisters. Helen really seems to be concerned about these two. Jim said, I'm sure they can hear you. They can probably hear you in the village. Jim's a little persnickety, a little sarcastic, but not like wicked. He seems to be decent deep down. And here's what Helen says to that: but I'm sure they misunderstood the people last night. As if there was a misunderstanding. As if when the house was burning and the villagers rush into the burning house and just start smashing up the place and throwing everything anywhere. Oh, it was just a misunderstanding. Like hilarious, okay? One thing I've repeated over the past couple weeks is, there's the delusion of the delusional. Okay, Mary Katz's insanity, that's one thing. And then there's the delusion of the rational people. Okay, rational people being irrational. That's often that's interesting to me. And here we get a little bit of that. Like, what is the source of Helen's delusion here? Why would she say, "Oh, it's just a misunderstanding," when it's like the villagers obviously knew what they were doing. It was clearly malicious, clearly trying to antagonize the Blackwood sisters and tear up their house. Of course, that's intentional. I mean, maybe they got wrapped up in the moment, but clearly that was malicious. They didn't just accidentally oh, maybe I'll throw this cup. Oh, whoops, I broke that cup. Oh, whoops, I broke another. It was some accident. They didn't understand. So, what's the source of Helen's delusion here about the intent of the village? Well, that's pretty straightforward, right? She just doesn't have the stomach to deal with real human evil. I mean, even this day. I mean, look at how academics talk. We say that this is problematic or that is problematic, and yeah, it's problematic, but it would be more accurate to say wicked or evil. We don't want to use those words because evil implies that there's truth. Well, of course it does. Because of course there's truth, wicked and evil. Whoa, you're being judgmental. I guess. Yeah, okay. I'm making a judgment. Yes. When a person goes into another person's house and smashes the place up out of malice, I'm going to make a judgment call that that's evil. Obviously, right? But Helen Clark can't bring herself to that. It's easier for Helen Clark to tell herself the lie that nobody really means anyone harm, right? Nobody really means anyone harm. Of course people mean other people harm. So she just lives in this sort of unserious, she's not a serious thinker when it comes to the topic of evil. And by the way, I think the best way to think about this, side note, the best line I've ever heard on the wickedness of mankind is Solzhenitsyn. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was he went through the gulags in the Soviet era and went in a communist, came out a Christian, fascinatingly. But he said, famously, the line between good and evil runs down every human heart. And I think that's the way to look at it. The line between good and evil runs down every human heart. Okay. So, yeah, you're in denial if you think that wickedness isn't in there. It is. Okay. Do I have anything else to say about chapter 9? We get this apology on page 543 toward last page or two in the chapter. Constance says to Mary Cat, "I want to say I'm sorry I was wicked last night. I was very wicked. I never should have reminded you of how they all died." So even bringing up the topic of the murder, even saying, "I know that you killed our parents," that's wickedness on Connie's part. She's she wants to apologize for it. Why? And of course that's not evil. Of course that's not a bad thing to do. She's scared, okay? She's not repenting out of a sense that she's done something wrong. She just wants to make sure that she's not rocking the boat, that she doesn't, and I don't think Constance understands this. I think this is subconscious. I think she really, on the surface, she really does think that she's done something wrong when she hasn't. But down here, I think all of Connie's choices, her behavior is just motivated out of straight up abject fear of what her sister will do to her unless she, Connie, keeps her sister Mary Cat happy and fed. So, chapter 10 begins. Slowly, the patterns of our days grew and shaped itself into a happy life. Okay, we talked a lot about Shirley Jackson's other novel that we read, Haunting of Hill House. The bizarre. What's so disturbing about Haunting of Hill House is the bizarre happiness. Okay, joy where there should be no joy, happiness in things that should not make one happy. Okay, is misplaced giddiness. Well, we see a little bit of that. We see a lot of that in Mary Cat in the final chapter here, chapter 10. Okay, she talks about how happy your life is. Like, she's living as a recluse in a half-burned, half-wrecked house with her sister who also won't leave. Like, that is not happy, but it makes Mary Cat happy, and it's evidence of her, like, sort of, what can I say, spiritual perversion, like social, antisocial attitude, orientation. Again, we see repetitions of safety. There's this concern about being safe. Again, I think that's really just code for isolated, properly isolated, properly in Mary Cat's mind. They talk about, 548, Mary Cat sets another rule for herself. I'm not allowed to touch Uncle Julian's things. Like, again, it looks on the surface, it seems like Mary Cat's controlling herself or limiting herself in some way. She's really limiting Connie. All of Mary Cat's rules are self-serving. All of Mary Cat's rules are self-serving. They're for her own benefit. Constance at one point says, "You are allowed. I'm telling you, you're allowed. You can go. You can touch Uncle Julian's things." And what does Mary Cat say to that? Bottom of 548. No. No. At one point, middle of 549, is their their clothes burned, and the only dress that Mary Cat has is the one she's wearing, and like they have to wash that eventually. And so what do? They Mary Cat dresses herself up with like a toga with this like picnic blanket, this tablecloth. And Mary Cat's like super happy, like, yeah, tablecloth. I'm wearing tablecloth. Lol, like, cool stuff. And Connie thinks it's tragic. She says this in the middle of 549. Mary Cat, oh Mary Cat. Constance dropped the tablecloth she was holding and put her arms around me. What have I done to my baby Mary Cat, she said. No house, no food, and dressed in a tablecloth. What have I done? Delusion. Pure delusion. Constance, you did not kill your family. Constance, you did not burn your house down. You did not destroy all your stuff. That was Mary Cat. You're delusional if you think you're in control of Mary Cat. She's in control of you, poor Constance. Okay, so the irrationality of the rational again appears here. We get the apologies that go on from the townsfolk again. Are their apologies sincere, or are there apologies like Constance apologies, which are just a way of like, a true apology says, I really messed up. I really regret what I did. Okay, these false apologies are really what they're really saying is, don't be mad at me. Do you see the difference? There's a difference between owning I did something wrong and I own it, and I won't do that again. I was wrong and I won't do that again. Versus don't be mad at me. Don't be mad at me is not an apology. Don't be mad at me is I regret the consequences of my action. There's regretting consequences of doing something wrong, and then there's regretting doing something wrong. Okay, two completely different modes of apology. Which one's the town doing? We just don't get inside their head. And maybe they're not all doing one. There's many people in a town, maybe many different attitudes. Okay. Charles shows up. What does Charles want? Has Charles changed? No, Charles has not changed at all. He's after one thing. He's trying to get that money. He shows up with a friend who's a photographer. what Charles really wants is some of the money in the safe of the Blackwoods. What he's willing to settle for is at least I can get a picture with my cousins, Charles's cousins, and maybe I'll get paid for that. If I get a picture, he says this to his friend, if you sell this to the magazine or something, do I get half? Charles, all he wants is money, and he seems too lazy to work for it. So all the money, none of the work. Good old Charles Blackwood, a real peach. Okay. And then we end chapter 10. We end the book, 557, 558, 559. I am so happy, Constance said at last, gasping. Mary Cat, I am so happy. What does Mary Cat say? I told you that you would like it on the moon. Okay. And now her transformation is complete, as the Dark Emperor Palpatine, I think, once said, your transformation is complete. Or complete the transformation, something like this. Constance, I think, and in the end here, has been wholly turned over to the dark side. Okay. Evidence of that, can I support that? Bottom of 558. The least Charles could have done, Constance said, considering seriously, was shoot himself through the head in the driveway. The least he could have done was shoot himself in the head. What? Okay, so this is the first evidence that, like, maybe Connie has these murderous fantasies as well. But there's no evidence that she's acted upon them. But like the seeds of Mary Cat, the seeds that have grown wild, in the seeds of evil that have not been pared back because Mary Cat does not allow herself to be punished or corrected in any way. So these seeds that have grown up like weeds of evil in Mary Cat do seem present to a lesser extent in Constance. C.S. Lewis had this idea that, like, if no one ever died on a long enough time scale, your average person is going to become a demon or an angel on a long enough time scale. That is, people get worse and continue to get worse, or people get better and continue to get better. More decent, more kind, more loving, more hateful, more resentful. Two different paths, and there's kind of a struggle in this life because we only live 70, 80, 90 years. On a long enough timeline, you're moving in one direction or the other. No one stays still. C.S. Lewis really delves into this in a book called The Great Divorce. It's not a marriage divorce. It's people moving in one of two directions, okay, away from each other. I think that's a useful way of looking at Mary Cat and Connie. I think that Mary Cat is far down the path to destruction, and Connie is following. Out of malice? No, out of fear. Out of fear. Fear can lead to bad behavior. Fear can lead to resentments. Didn't Yoda tell us? Not that Star Wars is, I have serious problems with the ethics of Star Wars. But this much they got true. Fear is part of the dark side. Not all fear is evil. We're taught, as believers here at this Christian university, we believe the Bible. We believe that we're taught that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1 tells us the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So we are right to fear him in some real way, to respect his power, to understand that we are powerless against God's will. Okay, if God wants a thing, so it will be, and there should be some fear in that, fear of the judge. Okay, of our final destination. That makes sense, but fear. Proverbs also says that fear of man is a trap. Fear of man is a trap, and fear of Mary Cat is a trap. And that's not an unfounded fear. Mary Cat's a killer. Mary Cat is a murderer. She, even still, over fear. I think Connie's fear of Mary Cat leads her to make some really self-destructive choices here in the end. Self-destructive choice of total isolation. And then we end with what? The last two lines here. Well, Constance said, I am afraid of spiders. And Mary Cat replies, Jonas and I will see to it that no spider ever comes near you. Oh, Constance, I said, we are so happy. Okay, and the last word of the book is happy. Happy in this totally strange and reclusive situation where the townspeople are like bringing them offerings. And maybe Mary Cat, she doesn't say this out loud, maybe Mary Cat reads this as like, yeah, that's right, you should bring me food. She fantasizes that her family like bows down in obeisance or something like that to her. And maybe the town bringing her food is like proper sacrifice for her greatness. Okay. Some closing thought here. As I was prepping for class today, a lot of people read this as a female empowerment story, and I think that's right. This is a story of female empowerment through murder and manipulation. Mary Cat is, her dad is tyrannical when he was alive. Charles is awful, and we get this sort of like female rebellion through murder. Like, yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Female empowerment. Like, it's not a great thing though in this case. Not a good thing. It would be much better for Mary Cat if she had accepted. Well, is accepted the right word? Let me not go that far. Let me just say this. It would have been better for Mary Cat if she hadn't murdered her family and pursued power through violence in that way. That's not good for the receiving end. It's not good for the giving end. Look at how corrupt she's become. We didn't get to see Mary Cat before the murders, but that has to corrupt a soul, and so we get a picture of a fully corrupted human being, and we have always lived in the castle. It's meant to be very disturbing. It's disturbing to me, but disturbing in an instructive way. All these, the end game of the pursuit of power. The end game of the pursuit of power is violence. It has to be violence and ultimately isolation as well. These things are inextricable, I think, and I think that's the message of the book. Of course, I'm always reading isolation into everything. I mean, it's there. It's usually there, but I'm always emphasizing. We should say, if you've taken me, if you've had me before as a teacher, I am against isolation. I am for community and love. Okay, guys, we will end there. Questions, concerns, email me, and we'll catch you next time.